Hi, Steve Stolberg here with monthly painting video number 62, made in Kuala Lumpur, February 2019. This month I'm doing something based on this sketch here I did. Let me just start the video running. Which, after adding shading on the head, looked like this. Light coming from her right seemed a natural choice to create drama. At first I tried it as Major Kusanagi and Dr. Manhattan because she has the same build and Manhattan can walk through walls, but I didn't like it. It's stupid. I also tried replacing Manhattan with Kitty Pryde because she also turns immaterial and walks through walls. Didn't like that either. So that was just to show you the development. Going in a different direction, I imagined it more like a horror movie with a monster threatening a fair, helpless maiden. So I added a greenish base just to have something to start from. It was a bit of a random choice. I ended up making it more blue later, but at this stage I hadn't decided on the color of the light yet. At this point the lighting is still just some kind of chandelier back there. Selecting the body, coloring it, flat color first, on his own layer, as usual. Hair below and above the body layer, 2 layers above and below. One, and then here I'm creating a layer for the negligee or the nightgown. I guess negligee is originally French, but it's the more common term in Sweden. Anyway, yeah, nightgown, hair. This is the second layer of hair above the body layer. The negligee will also turn out to be 2 layers, one behind and one above, plus a shadow for shadow casting from the negligee onto the body. So 3 layers for that one. And then here I'm airbrushing some simplistic shading real quick to sort of just basically block in some ambient occlusion type shading here first. And this is the reflection. So you'll see the layers proliferating quite a lot here in a bit, because with the mirror everything I do outside the mirror has to be doubled inside the mirror, so as a reflection. So except for this layer which I'm working on here, which is the lighting layer, which I kept separate at first, you'll see, but the body had its own layer in the mirror: reflection body, reflection nightgown, reflection front of the nightgown, reflection back of the nightgown, you know, sandwiching the body in between 2 layers. And also some shadow casting. It had its own layer inside the mirror. So this one was a bit of a more of a complex, with a few more layers than I normally have. Here I'm casting the light onto the frame also, which I imagine as a sort of semi-complex, sort of golden frame. But I didn't add the actual gold color until much later. We'll see that. Sort of cyan walls, bluish green cyan walls. There's the mirrored wall back there, mirror background. So everything, pretty much everything, is doubled up here. The real background and the mirrored background. Here I'm moving the shadow cast by her body onto the frame and the wall, moving it a little bit. I think I moved it more later as well. Some guy drilling on the weekend, not supposed to. And here I'm erasing from the lighted layer. So sometimes when you have very strongly defined lighting like this, especially on delicate materials like skin, you want to be really precise and delicate with the skin. So you can do this all on one layer above the skin. You know, the lighting is now separate. You can see here on the right hand side, you can see which one I'm working on. One layer above the actual darker tone of the skin. Later I dropped this down, but that was much later. I worked a lot on the skin first before I dropped this layer down, and it helped me to not muddy it up and mess it up and Here, for instance, this is quite easy to do if you keep them separate. I'm warming up the terminator. That's the borderline between the lighted part and the darker part. Let's call it terminator. I darken it a little bit on the thigh, you can see there, but I'll darken it more in a bit, you'll see. And adding some sort of greenish bounce light here on her skin, later adding a little bit more cool light here. Adding some muscle tone here to her leg. And I have the ribs coming in there. Those ribs were a bit too clearly defined for quite a while, and so right at the end I kind of diminished them a lot. Well, I could say push them back. I think they jumped out when I did this auto contrast right there, which I like to do a lot, because having a separate layer lets you use auto contrast on each item or material one by one and fade it in and out. So auto contrast and fade, that's a tool I use a lot. But I think, yeah, the ribs got a bit too defined. Maybe not here yet, but they will be cooling off some areas of the skin here a little bit with some grayish or less warm color. You don't want to actually paint green onto the skin. You want to be gentle with it. So you take the skin color and you make it more gray, less skin color, so to speak, less warm, and it'll look greenish just by default. Even if there is no green in there, it's still orange, but it's just less orange, so it looks green. Anyway, that's a little bit of color theory there. That's you can research more about that on the internet, or if you have any questions, just email me, ask me, contact me somehow. I'm available. This is the nightgown here. Now, initially I made a mistake here. You see, I make it grayish, like darker than the surrounding area. And that's a mistake. When the lighting is coming from this angle towards us, it lightens up this type of cloth material. It will just go whiter, not darker. So I'll fix that later. And it's easy to find reference for that too. You simply Google on Pinterest. You can just search for diaphanous, which is diaphanous, which describes the material of the nightgown. And as usual, Rule 34, people upload stuff. Diaphanous will mostly apply to attractive women posing in nightgowns. So basically, but yeah, that's one trick way to find lots of reference for this kind of thing. Here I'm working on the monster head, of course. This is like the first basic design, the first layer of face I put down, and actually right at the end you'll see me enlarging the head, moving it to the left so that her hand actually covers his whole mouth. You won't see the mouth anymore. So, but then again, I have layers in there, so you can, if you get the PSD from me in my Patreon, you can just grab the you can just hide the girl, you can hide all the layers, you can hide the nightgown, for instance, and she's all of a sudden she's nude. But actually I like the nightgown better. It's it's more of an understated sort of thing to have the nightgown there is still sexy. I think it's actually sexier than complete nude. But anyway, it's up to you. You can hide it, and to see the monster better, you can hide her hand, and all these layers are still there in the final PSD. I made her rib cage a bit bigger there. It was a bit too flattened up against the wall. And of course, having it on two layers, then I need to fix the light layer also, skin light. Have to move both of them, those two layers, and then later on you will see here I'm cleaning up the light layer. But in a little bit you'll see me moving the nightgown layer as well. obviously the nightgown has to be moved as well, since it was fairly tight up against the chest right there. And next I'm gonna work on the monster hands. Here you can see the nightgown. It's darker here. It shouldn't be darker here, because it's catching the light coming from beyond, and it works like hair or any other fine diaphanous material, grass, leaves, anything transparent, translucent. It will transmit the light through it. It will catch the light first and transmit it through. And unless it's like seriously very dark, black or something, then. But this nightgown is white or nearly white, so it would definitely be very bright in this kind of lighting. Detailing the monster head. Yeah, I hadn't gotten to the monster hands yet. I got ahead of myself there. I'm using a textured brush here to just give some rough feeling to his skin. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to sort of express every single wart and bump and pustule and vein and wrinkle and fold. You can sort of do them a bit roughly like this, and not do all of them, just sort of hint at some of them, because I knew that it was going to get darker and darker also, and when you shade something enough, all the details disappear. So yeah, I don't like wasted effort. So you know, here you can see the head is more finished. I worked on the head a little bit more there. The hand. Right now I'm working on the nightgown, which I am brightening. You can see now it's brighter than the surrounding area, which is better, but I brightened it more later. And I also shortened, I forgot to mention, you saw earlier, I cut off the nightgown. It was just too long and annoying and like featureless, like there was nothing special about it. I wanted to make it more unique, like a specific, more specificity, and so cut it off and added this ribbon of silk or satin on the bottom of it, or whatever it is, around the edges. And I added a bow as well at the top to hold it together. I also opened it up in front. It wasn't in the beginning, it was just featureless. Later you'll see I extended this area back here, dropping down a bit more straightly, which I don't know, I just think the composition is better that way. Originally what I was trying to do was show the motion. She's being pulled back, and that's why the nightgown is going to the left in the image, but I just think it looks a little bit unnatural, a little bit too much there. So, and here I'm lightening the nightgown in the reflection as well. Everything you do on the left, you have to do on the right. And here I researched Frankenstein's laboratory from the original movie. I want to have something. I decided to have an electric arc lighting here instead of just a boring chandelier. Just something different, something more exciting. So I'm bluing up the background instead of greenish, more blue. But you have to be careful to. The blue can't be too strong, you know, like saturated, because you want to save the saturation for where the lighting is the strongest. So. you gotta sort of count backwards. From maximum saturation, put that where you want it, and then count backwards from there. Pull the saturation down until you get to the darkest area here, which has the lowest saturation. And this is photo bashing from the reference that I found, but in a minute you'll see. And I'm just first painting roughly in the lighting, because the lighting is different, is completely different from the photo. So in the photo there was no light source at the top of this coil. I call it a coil, I don't know what it is. Retro sci-fi coil, electric coil. But getting the lighting closer now, I have to I have to saturate the lighting a little bit more later. I'll do that later, but first I have to construct the whole thing from scratch, and that's what I'm doing here. So making the bottom ones slightly larger than the top ones, because there's a slight perspective happening here, because we're down on the floor level almost and looking up. And copying, just flipping, copying over, mirroring them over to the other side. Now I'm selecting following the construction lines, and I'm using an elliptical selection tool there to just make sure that I get the ellipses right. And then when I'm done selecting, I make it black, make a black mask out of it, and flip that one too, just to make sure that from left to right that it's exactly symmetrical. And now I'm using that mask to adjust the shape of the coil here, the silhouette, the outline. And when that's done, I do some work inside the coil as well. I added some technical retro looking stuff up at the top there, inspired by Victorian arc lamps, which you can research. And I think I'm doing the frame now. Yep, I put some texture on it first, and then I use gradient map to remap the colors to gold. But this is a little bit too gold, so I will be reducing the yellow in a minute, especially here in the more brightly lit parts, because it's lit by this blue electric light, bluish purplish or cyan, I don't know. I find that since cyan is a lighter color, that often if you want to go really bright blue, you have to go towards cyan a little bit. Anyway, working on her face now. Defining the nose some more. Adding some bounce light there on the lower forehead or the nose bridge, lower part of the face. I'll be darkening and reddening up the cheeks on top, because since she's in shadow from the arc light here, the main light source will be other areas down here lit by the arc light bouncing upwards towards her face in a kind of a bluish light, as you see. And again, I'm not using blue, but more grayish than the warm skin, and adding a little bit more gray to create a bluish effect on some parts of the skin. And here I'm making a mask. I copied her layer, and you know the lighting has been dropped down now, by the way. Copied that layer, her body layer, skin layer, and made a mask of it by curves. Put it in the alpha, put it in a new alpha channel, and then you can use it as a selection after that. And then use that to use color balance to make the lighted parts of your skin bluish because of the arc lighting, the blue lighting. And now I'm doing the same to the nightgown. I'm bluing it up because the nightgown has this blue lighting happening everywhere. And here I'm detailing the hands. And right here I'm looking at my own left hand as reference. I'm holding it up and just clenching it and looking at it. There's an easy way to do it. And this is nearly done, and you can see here how many layers I have here. Reflection, mirror, fog. I added some fog in there, you'll see, just behind her. in front of the coil, in front of the back wall, and behind her. I have some brick texture in here that you will see in a moment. Yeah, that's it. Back part of the nightgown, front part of the nightgown. This is the electric light. I had 2 layers of those just to make it really bright. 2 slightly different modes of layering, which you can inspect later if you get the PSD. Yeah, here I'm going through some of the layers real quick, which you can also do. And here's the finished one. I played with the levels and saturation like I always do, and added some dust on the mirror that you can see here. That's on its own layer too, I think. Here you can see where I made the gold more bluish. Yeah, that's it. Hope you like it. Let me know if you have any feedback or questions. Thanks for your support, and see you next month.